All right, ladies and gentlemen, I know that I haven't been posting a lot. That's because I'm just busy with my practice and adulting. This information has already been posted on one of my sister projects, but I feel like it's not fair to not post it on here. It's talking about the Nephilim and the Raphaim again, because I think it's a very important subject. It's important to me, and it's something that comes up a lot, but that's probably because the almighty algorithm is just reading my thoughts, whatever. So anyway, Genesis chapter 6, verse 4 states that there were already giants on the earth before the invasion of the fallen and after. This implies that humanity was much larger during the antediluvian days, which is why the daughters of men would have been compatible with the sons of God. There's nothing to indicate that the Nephilim were larger than humans. However, it did describe them as mighty and of renown. Many people assume the Nephilim were evil because of what chapter 6 implies, but Nephilim were never directly targeted. Verse 5 calls out the wickedness of man, and in verse 7, God states his desire to destroy man that he created. Technically, and from a mainstream point of view, if the Nephilim weren't in God's plan, they weren't his creation. But they would eventually be part of the plan, which we'll cover soon. The flood wasn't meant to wipe out the Nephilim. As unbelievable as it may seem, several sources point to this conclusion. In the book of 1st Enoch, the mothers of the hybrid Nephilim are said to have become sirens, creatures that thrive underwater. If that's the case, no doubt many of their children would share the same traits or obtain the same ability from their angelic parents. Though not mentioned as one of the original watchers, there is a fallen angel attributed to the sea named Rahab. If she or fallen angels with a similar affinity were to procreate, no doubt their offspring would be able to survive underwater. It is also known that, like their angelic parents, Nephilim could survive without their physical bodies. In fact, their spirits were cursed to endlessly wander the earth. First Enoch also mentions how Lamech, the father of Noah, feared his son because he resembled the watcher angels. If Noah was indeed God's chosen one, he would have had knowledge of the child's true lineage. Therefore, by preserving Noah and his family, God would have preserved the Nephilim bloodline. His bloodline would predominantly pop up within the descendants of Ham, such as Nimrod, the mighty hunter of men and king of Babel, the Mizraim, and the Canaanites. However, one could also conclude that the Israelites, who were also part of the Canaanite collective, would give rise to mighty individuals with divine lineage. More on that later. Another source that would attest to the survival of the Nephilim is the apocryphal book of Jubilees. In it, Mastema, an angel compared to Satan, is granted their request to have 10% of the Nephilim spared destruction and used for the purpose of divine judgment. Under his direction, and quote unquote his, the Nephilim were to test mankind. Can this group be considered as good or evil? It's hard to say, but the idea doesn't go against biblical principle. In Psalm 78:49, it states that God himself sends out evil angels to do his bidding. It makes one wonder if this is the reason why normal human beings were so adamant to demonize and wipe out anything resembling the Nephilim. Do they attempt to escape judgment by killing off their judges? It is widely accepted that the Anakim are an offshoot tribe of the Nephilim, but is this true? Numbers 13:33 describes them as giants. Deuteronomy chapter 9 verse 2 states that they were great and tall. Historians link the Anakim to Goliath in the Bible, who was a mighty man among the Philistines. However, there is one thing that is missing during the time of making this script. whatever, doing the research, there was no evidence found that they believed themselves to be descendants of divinity. Okay? If there is any evidence and you've come upon it, please correct me. I'm open to it. If anyone listening does have any proof, just put it in the comments. The Raphaim, however, which are mentioned several times in the Bible, do historically claim both authority of and relationship to the divine. The Raphaim have been identified as minor gods and demigods. Hold on a sec. I think I got some kind of hornet thing in my car. Whatever, I'm going to keep it moving. So, the Raphaim have been identified as minor gods and demigods, but they are associated with so much more. They were also affiliated with shades of the dead, healers, ancestors, rulers, judges, and war heroes, and titans. In Ugaritic texts, their kind was described as a brotherhood that supported one another. Okay, so they were like a tribe. They were individuals. They were also like a fraternity. Both male and female Raphaim existed. Though known to generally carry out the will of their parent god, the Raphaim were believed to have the ability to cultivate relationships with multiple gods. Despite the modern Bible painting of Raphaim as the enemy, it is quite possible that some of them were allied with, or portrayed as being allied with, the God of the Old Testament. We need only to analyze a couple of the Old Testament books to see. Joshua was the son of Nun. While no one speaks about it, we have a direct tie to an Israelite being the offspring of a goddess, glaring us in the face in the very first book of Joshua, in the very first verse of the book of Joshua. For those unfamiliar with the Egyptian pantheon, Nun, or Nun, was the goddess of primordial chaos. She was described as the goddess of the watery abyss. Joshua was also known to be a war hero and general who led several successful campaigns against the enemy of the Israelites. Next, we have the example of the many judges who pull off amazing feats mentioned in the book of the same name. So you've got Shamgar, who strikes down 600 Philistines with an animal prod. That's in Judges 3:31. Deborah, a prophetess, who gave advice to General Barak that led to a successful campaign. During that campaign, General Barak wanted to bring her with him. And because he did, he won that campaign. That's in Judges, I think it's chapter 4 and 5. Gideon destroys all the altars to Baal and the Asherah poles the Israelites have put up. He also leads a successful campaign against the Midianite army with only 300 men. Does that sound familiar? Jephthah is described as a mighty warrior who is chosen to lead his people against the Amorites. Now, here's the interesting thing. Jephthah seemed to have respected the God of the Ammonites, not Amorites, the Ammonites, because it said that he tried to talk to these people. Now, whether it's trying to make the Israelites look good or not, I don't know. But in it, he was just talking about, hey, he was like, respect our territory and we'll respect yours. Now, to me, I feel like the Ammonites probably said no because they knew that, the Israelite God was going to tell them to just basically off everybody anyway and eventually make his followers, go to war. But it was interesting that there's actually respect shown for a quote-unquote pagan god. The hell is with these hornet things? Anyway, Jephthah also defeated the Ephraimites. Then you have the most famous judge, Samson, who kills a lion with his bare hands. He kills 30 men who cheat him out of a bet. He kills 1,000 men with an animal's jawbone. And finally tears down a whole temple, killing himself and more Philistines in death than he did in life. Okay. That's not normal. Okay. These feats are not feats of normal people. One might argue that they had God's blessing and were anointed, but couldn't that also be said of the sons and daughters of other gods? Don't we have countless stories of non-Israelite individuals doing similar things? This only proves that the Raphaim are not an isolated phenomenon. Though seen as heroic from many points of view, there is a dark side to those belonging to the Nephilim network, which is what I call it. Anything dealing with the fallen, dealing with the Nephilim, even those who are derived from the Nephilim, the later tribes. Divine power with a physical shell can be overwhelming and lead to the urges that are considered destructive to the people around them. One might become insatiable because sustaining divine energy requires enormous amounts of sustenance for fuel. The constant urge to eat could have led many hybrids to devour resources to the point of starving themselves and others, which could have led to cannibalism. I'm going to be real about it. Okay. Either way, such individuals would no doubt be seen as monstrous to normal humans and possibly other Nephilim. The reason why I say this is that Nephilim are individuals. They can make individual choices. Okay. Society tends to stereotype those who are part of the Nephilim order, network, whatever. Okay, they have personalities. Everyone is different. They're unique. Okay. So, continuing on. As for the vampiric aspect of the Nephilim, there is both a literal and metaphoric expression of this aspect. The metaphoric explanation can be understood by the symbol associated with Nephilim, the jester. Not only was the jester a teller of heroic tales, but he was also one to mock and mimic society in dramatic ways. The vampiric nature of the Nephilim reflects the vampiric nature of society in general. We don't need to look far to see. Lack of nutrients in our food causes us to be endlessly hungry. We crave constant attention and validation via jobs, relationships, and social media, often without giving thought to reciprocating anything. Life, in most of the Western world at least, revolves around consumerism. The problem is that most people don't think such truths thrust into their faces. They don't like such truths, thrust into their faces. So they hate, fear, and attempt to destroy those reminders. One could ask, can a reflection in a mirror be evil? The second aspect of vampirism is derived from the concept of hungry ghosts. In many of the ancient cultures, ancestors who were not properly fed became endlessly thirsty and hungry. For those of the Nephilim, these cravings would be multiplied 1,000-fold. Those portrayed as demonic would be left to starve, but that fear of interacting with dead Nephilim would lead to its own complications. Nephilim spirits retain the divine knowledge taught to them by their parents. Therefore, they would have more influence on the living than the average human spirit. This would allow them to indulge in their vampiric natures to the detriment of those unable to protect themselves. Are Nephilim evil, or are they simply misunderstood? Are they something in between? Only those fearless enough to interact with them can be the judge of that. The information within this episode is only the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more about the Nephilim hidden within history and holy books. Will you be the one brave enough to go looking? I've also gotten extra UPG, Gnosis. there were Nephilim who cared about those who were close to them, but because of the propaganda, and this goes for the ones that are living today too, as well as the ones that lived in the past, they were abandoned. They were treated with fear by family and friends, those who, claim to be their friends. And that in itself can drive somebody to be quote unquote evil, or to do things that are not accepted within their society. So, a lot of times we tend to judge people according to the actions that we see, but we don't know what those actions are stemming from. We don't know what the root cause of that is. And the only way that we can do this is to actually figure out who the Nephilim were. Do we protect ourselves? Of course. But at the same time, we have to be open to looking at the bigger picture. So there's more than one side to the story. And most of the time, the only side that we get is the biblical side, which doesn't really say much. So that's all I have to say for now about the Nephilim and the Raphaim. I'd still want to just put it out there. If there are any who are in corporeal form, physical form, you are welcome to contact me. Let's talk. I'm putting it out there. I know there are Nephilim out there. I know that they monitor social media. I know that they monitor such things. And I'm putting out the invitation. And I think you know why. All right.